So it's pretty clear that large swaths of Americans are suffering from physical problems in the form of drug addiction, alcoholism, obesity, and in general falling life expectancy that's the result of all of those things. But there's also an emotional component to this. Millions of Americans are anxious, clinically depressed, and miserable. Look at prescription drug numbers. They tell the story. But on the left, a response has emerged: suicide. 9 states plus the District of Columbia allow doctors to help kill patients rather than treating them. New York may soon become the next state to legalize that. What are the effects of this exactly? Who's thinking it through deeply? Should we do this? Charles Camosy is professor of theological bioethics at Fordham University and the author of the book Resisting Throwaway Culture: How a Consistent Life Ethic Can Unite a Fractured People. We recently spoke with the professor. Here's how it went. The way it's framed is this: it's your body. It's your choice. Nobody can prolong your life. Nobody can tell you to live if you don't want to. It's the most basic choice we have. Government can't interfere. A lot of people believe that. Why shouldn't they?
Well, if you just look at the statistics of, for instance, Oregon, which has had it legal since the 90s,
yes.
Physical pain and suffering, which we all are sympathetic to, you have to be a moral monster not to be sympathetic in those
yes.
cases. That doesn't even make the top 5 reasons people in Oregon ask for assisted suicide. But Tucker, here are 2 of the top 5: fear of being a burden on others and fear of losing one's autonomy. Now, I'm a college professor, so I'm around progressives a lot. It's
yes.
an absolutely bizarre reaction, isn't it, to say, well, there are these people who fear these things because of our socially unjust world. Let's make it easier for them to kill themselves. That can't possibly be the correct response from somebody that cares about social justice.
I agree with that. And it also can't be long until somebody, since this is a company predicated on business and making money, and that's great, but until somebody figures out that it's a lot cheaper if you're dead than if you're, say, being treated for diabetes.
And that's why, Tucker, some of the vulnerable populations that you champion on this show, and thank you for doing that, are some of the most skeptical of assisted suicide out there. They get it. They know that when you say things like, who's a burden? It's them. Who has lost
right.
their autonomy?
Right.
It's them.
Right.
And there's a whole elitist substructure which says we're going to benefit from that. Now, it's not explicit, but they do, in fact, benefit from that. And that's why I wrote a book called Resisting Throwaway Culture, because it's that throwaway culture that we have to resist, at least if we do, in fact, care about these vulnerable populations.
I would think so. And what I find so striking is that if you're a leader in this country, a political leader, governor of New York, for example, you were elected to care for the people in your state, city, town, country. And rather than do that, you decide it's easier to kill them. Why doesn't somebody point out that that's like a gross perversion of what you're supposed to be doing?
Well, there are groups that are pointing this out quite effectively, actually, and they are also tend to be progressive. Like, as you probably know, disability rights groups
yes.
are, in fact, the leaders in resisting the throwaway culture that exists via assisted suicide. You know who else are on the front lines of this? African Americans and Latinos, who are very disproportionately against this, especially compared to privileged whites. But we hear about racial justice all the time, and I think it's good, but how about being consistent and saying, let's listen to these voices of color here, not just on the set of issues that we happen to care about Monday through Friday.
So it's New Yorker subscribers who are for this. It's not average people, is what you're saying.
It's definitely not average people.
Interesting. Do you think it'll happen in New York?
If I had to bet, I would guess it will. It's fallen in California. It's fallen in New Jersey, where I live. It's fallen in several other states. But again, I think if we can pay attention to those vulnerable voices, those who don't get heard, the forgotten people, and we really pay attention to them, not just give it lip service, we're going to be deeply skeptical of this.
I think we will. You know who loves this? Health insurers. Of course they do. Professor, thank you so much for coming on tonight and for being one of the rare voices against this. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.